What's up, everybody? I'm Dan Kornhauser,
I am Bobby Hunt.
and thank you guys for tuning in. We are back for something we've been waiting for a long time, something that we should have done 4 months ago. It's our 2020 MLB season preview. It's finally here. I'm excited. I know Bob's excited. We got our fantasy baseball draft coming up in a couple of days. I own that league. I'm defending champ. I'm looking forward to coming back and doing something special. But fantasy sports aside, baseball's back.
You have a real selective memory there. I won it last year. You won it. But nonetheless, yes, Dan is usually in the playoffs almost every year. So yes, he is very good in the fantasy
So,
baseball. But I did win it in our league last year, so he was confused. It's okay. It's okay. It's been
it
a
was
while.
a it was a 5-5 tie. Semantics.
It's been a while. No, that was the year you won it. I think I won it barely like 6-5 last year. But anyway,
Semantics.
I'm the champ. And I'm looking forward to that draft as well on Tuesday. We waited as late as possible. And fortunately, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of guys sitting out. But before I get to that, I'm just going to give a quick rundown of what this season is going to be like as far as the rules and how long it's going to be. So, as everyone who's been following by now knows, it's going to be a 60-game season. And they're going to be doing it very quickly. It's going to be in 66 or 67 days. And it's going to run from Thursday, July 23rd, coming up this week, through September 27th, which is a Sunday. So there's not going to be a lot of off days, and players are really going to be expected to be there for every game, especially the everyday players, of course. So one thing we got to keep in mind as far as the rules is that this rule is going to be in place even if we had a normal season, and that's the three batter minimum for pitchers coming into the game. So obviously the starters are going to pitch to more than that, and if they get hurt, of course, they can get taken out. But relievers are going to have a 3-batter minimum when they come into the game. Now, it'll be very interesting to see how teams maybe work around this in some ways, but basically they have to pitch to 3 batters before getting pulled. Then, for this special season, for 60 games, what was agreed upon between the Players Union and the owners was there's going to be a universal DH. So, in the NL, there isn't going to be pitchers hitting. It's going to be a DH for every team. And this is certainly a big help for one of the local teams. The Mets have plenty of players that could slide into the DH spot, most notably Yoenis Cespedes. A team like the Cubs has needed it for years with Kyle Schwarber, who's a major liability. So those just stick out. But even there's plenty of other NL teams that really benefit from there being a universal DH this year. Next, another new funky rule for this 60-game season is the extra innings rule, where once the extra inning starts, once the 10th inning starts, a runner will be placed on second base to start the inning. And that's going to be the batter that made out in the previous inning. So hypothetically, since I just said Cespedes, he's in my mind. If he made out, he was the last out in the 9th inning, and it's tied, goes to the 10th inning, he would be the runner placed at second. Although I will say I do believe you can replace that guy if you so choose. I don't think you have to. I mean, I don't know why you can't make a substitution like any other point in the game. But that is going to be a new rule. And basically they're doing it so that they shorten the amount of these games, or the length of these games, rather. It's something I don't really like. Hopefully it doesn't stick, but I am okay with it given the
Same.
construct of this season.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll get to some of the roster things. 30 players are going to start out as opposed to 25. They actually changed it to 26 for this season if it were to be a normal 162-game season. But because of COVID-19 and some of the issues with that, it's going to start out with 30 players for each team. And then it'll go down to 28 players after 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And after the subsequent 2 weeks, it'll go down to 26 for the rest of the season. The trade deadline is no longer July 31st, at least for this season. That's been pushed to August 31st to allow teams more time. And also, one caveat with that is only players in the 60-player pool can be dealt. So right now, there's no minor league baseball going on. Basically, there's 60 players in camp for all these teams, and you can only utilize those 60. Now, if you put guys on an injured list and call someone up, place them on that 60-player roster. But as far as trades, they can only be from that 60-player pool. You won't see really lower level guys that are on single A teams or guys that were just drafted being involved in trades. And then lastly, we have a 3-player taxi squad for road trips. So basically, teams will be able to carry an extra 3 players every time they go on a road trip, just in case a bad injury happens or a few guys get struck with COVID. So at least they have an extra 3 players that they can quickly use right away, rather than having to bring them from wherever their other training site is. Essentially, the other 30 players that aren't on these rosters are likely going to be at a close site that the team utilizes. It's basically either a AA, AAA, single A location. So for the Yankees, I would presume they'd probably use either Staten Island Stadium or the Trenton Thunder Stadium for those other 30 guys to keep training while the 30-man roster is playing these regular season games.
That's a lot. There's a lot going on there, Bob. It's a lot of changes, let alone a 60-game season. But DH, guy on second base to start, crazy things going on. I don't know how I feel about some of these changes. I'm not a baseball purist. I'm not like, a lot of like your dad, I'm sure, or like people of that age group, older generations, I'm sure, are more baseball purists than we are. And they probably hate the DH and the NL. And they probably hate some of these rules and hate the changes, but it is what it is. I like some of the changes to try to speed things up, try to get things going. It's smart because the way things have been going, nobody really likes watching baseball unless you're an actual fan. Like, it's fun to be at the games, but we all know baseball's falling behind the NFL, the NBA. Soccer is trailing quick. Surprisingly, soccer is becoming a lot more popular in the States. And then, of course, hockey. Hockey playoffs are right around the corner. So, I mean, baseball's got some work to do. So we'll see how this works for the short season. But it's a lot going on, man. It's a lot to digest.
It really is. And with the DH, it really just comes down to AL versus NL fans. So I'm a Yankee fan, so is my father. So he doesn't mind the DH being in, but
All right.
how it goes. If your team is in the AL, you say, I prefer the DH. And if your team's in the NL, most of those fans say, they prefer seeing pitchers hit and they love the strategy. But it's been heading this way for a long time. I would say I would get the NL fans' point of view more so if they had pitchers hit at the lower levels, but they really don't. Through high school, college, and even the minor leagues now, they all have DHs, and we're not going back we're not changing that all of a sudden. Everything's become so specialized. So this was inevitable, and I really think it's one of the rules that will stick in future seasons.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what sticks from this whole COVID era of baseball that we have and sports in general, because like I said, everything else is coming up. But let's dive into it, Bob. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to break down. We're going to have 3 separate sections for the show, for this episode. We're going to go with the East, AL, NL first, region-wise. Then we're going AL, NL Central, then AL, NL West. We're going to break down all 30 teams as best we can, give you predictions, division by division, tell you who's winning what division, what wild cards are coming out, and then we will give you our World Series picks. We're not going to be doing individual player awards or anything like that. It's going to be crazy. I think it's a futile exercise. So we're going to skip that for now. But when we're talking about the teams, I'm sure we'll be throwing out some names, and you'll recognize a lot of them. But let's dive right into it. Let's go with the American League East. We're both Yankees fans. This is what it is. Sorry, Mets fans. Sorry, Greg. You're the second best in this town. So, and that's okay, because the Yankees happen to be the best team in the AL, and they just happen to be the second best team in baseball. You'll see who the best team in baseball is later on. But let's go Bronx Bombers, baby. We're back. It's championship or bust this year. No Tom fucking foolery. We want a chip. It's time.
I can just imagine anybody who's watching this that's not a fan of the Yankees rolling their eyes backwards as much as they can.
Good.
We remain objective, I
Oh,
promise.
absolutely.
With these, because we do take it seriously. We're not little kids anymore. We're not stupidly biased, but let's be real. The Yankees are one of the best teams in Major League Baseball.
One thing that I was looking at when I was looking at all the rosters and I was deciding how I wanted to make my predictions and stuff like that, I kept coming back to a couple of things. Baseball normally is a ridiculously long season. It's almost too long. And over that 4 or 5 month period from March, April, all the way through October, through the whole summer, a lot of things can happen. And teams dig themselves into holes that they never recover early on. Then there's other teams like the Indians, for example, that dig themselves into a hole, but they figure it out because they're that damn good. And 160 games gives you a lot of room for error, and it gives the other teams around you to get back to the pack if they're getting too ahead too early. So a couple of things really stood out to me was one, I think teams that are going to be successful in this 60-game season are going to need one of two things. Either one, they're going to have the veteran leadership, the talent that they need, like key veteran guys, or two, they're going to have spunky young guys who maybe go on a little run, and teams that are okay, but more middle of the pack in most years. In a 162-game year, they would be middle of the pack. But in a 60-game sprint like this, I think we're going to see something special. So for me, there was a balancing act of who are the more complete teams, and there's a few of them that are really locks, in my opinion, for the playoffs, and what teams are really bound to surprise. And it was a lot. It's a lot. It was not easy to put my predictions together because I kept looking at teams saying, oh man, they might have the starting pitching, but their bullpen's kind of butt. That might really screw them. And then thinking, well, but they got these young guys that they can bring up, and they're, in the top 100. They got like 8 guys in the top 100 prospects, and those guys are going to get playing time, and they're going to shit. There's always young players who go on these tears, these 1 month tears, 6 week tears where, they're going to hit fucking 350 and 10 home runs in a month, and then fall off and hit 1 home run the next month and hit fucking 100. Strike out more than they get actual at-bats. Wait, is that even possible? No. Anyway, so, but Bob knows what I'm talking about. We see those, but it was tough, man. I don't know. Was it as hard for you, Bob, to put your predictions together, or was it pretty more cut and dry for you because it was fucked up?
Only for certain divisions, 1 or 2 here and there, and then picking wild cards. Of course, one of the factors is you figure it's 60 games, and it can be very fluky potentially, because if a team sustains an injury to one of their big stars, it could cost them half a season, right like that. If someone broken fingers, for instance, are one of the very common injuries in baseball, and that's usually a 4 to 6 week injury, even if you just break your thumb. 4 to 6 weeks in a 60-game season, that's half or even 3/4 of the season in this case. Mm-hmm. That's definitely a big factor. But when I looked at it, one thing that really stood out above everything else, and there's certainly multiple factors that you can get into as far as what's most important in this 60-game sprint, but to me, it's really the continuity. Teams that more or less haven't made a lot of changes, that aren't bringing in a new manager or a new regime, or especially a lot of new players onto their team. And who better in that case to start with than the Yankees? Their entire roster, at least projected for this 30-man roster, is going to be identical to last year, save for Garrett Cole, who's the biggest prize in free agency and one of the biggest stars in Major League Baseball. He nearly won the AL Cy Young last year and lost to his teammate Justin Verlander with the Astros. They retain pretty much everyone, and they have guys healthy now. That's one of the biggest things that came out of this pandemic, as just looking at it from a sports aspect in baseball, is they were able to get Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton healthy. Stanton played yesterday in the exhibition against the Mets, and Judge was playing today. Judge even hit a home run. DJ LeMahieu, even their second baseman, was tested positive for COVID-19 a couple weeks ago, but he actually returned and played tonight. There's, I think, still going on right now. Or it might have just ended. I know the Yankees were up 6-0, but Garrett Cole is really the only new addition. So I think it really helps a team like the Yankees and others that we'll get to the fact that there's not going to be new faces. There's not, say, three new starters on the rotation that are going to have to build a rapport with the catchers and learn totally new signals and terminology.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to have a new manager with the Yankees. And basically, I think that's a big help to the Yankees. Obviously, they have a very talented roster and are one of the favorites to win the World Series, whether it was 162 games or 60 games. But they get a lot of guys back healthy. And one I also really want to mention is Miguel Andujar, who nearly won the Rookie of the Year a couple years ago. Should have won it over Shohei Ohtani, but that's another discussion that we had in the past. And he's healthy now. He was injured all of last year, save for 5 or 10 games. And he's just a flat-out great hitter. Now, he might not play every game, but he can play at third base. They've been teaching him left field. And he might even get sprinkled in at first base here and there if there's injuries. But he's a professional hitter, and they're just have a tremendously deep lineup. And another guy I need to mention is Jordan Montgomery, who pitched tonight against the Mets. He was actually 6th in Rookie of the Year voting the year Aaron Judge won it in 2017. And he had under a 4 ERA. He made 29 starts that year. And he was really sharp tonight. I did watch about 4 or 5 innings of the exhibition game. And yes, it's an exhibition, but he struck out Jeff McNeil. He struck out Pete Alonso twice. He struck out Robinson Cano and Ahmed Rosario. So he was striking out some very good hitters on the Mets. And he's another guy that's going to slide into the back of the rotation and be a factor. So the Yankees just have depth all across the place. Everyone knows their bullpen is probably best in the majors. So they really don't have many issues right now. Their biggest issue right now is just, is Aroldis Chapman going to be healthy for the season? He tested positive last week for COVID, but you would figure he'll be healthy in about a week or 10 days. There's really a lot of things looking up for the Yankees right now, and I fully expect them to win this division.
I would lean to agree with you. I'm not going to lie, but I don't think it's going to be as easy as you make it seem, because the AL East, to say the very least, has a couple of pretty talented teams besides the Yankees, and one of them is a huge threat in the Tampa Bay Rays. Now, we're both Yankees fans, as we've discussed, and of course, I love them. We're gonna get back to them soon enough, but these Rays really scare me, Bob, because they've got a little bit of everything to not only succeed over the course of a full season, which they did, and they showed how great they were, despite the injuries to the pitching staff, which kind of was their downfall a bit, but their pitching staff is stacked. Charlie Morton, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, who was dominating before he got hurt, Brian Yarbo, even Yanni Chirinos as their 5 slot. I mean, stacked, 1 through 5 stacked, up there with the best rotations in baseball. They're hitting. They're not going to have any problem hitting. They made some really shrewd moves this offseason. I really like the moves that they made. I think of anyone got added this whole offseason, Hunter Renfroe, real solid addition for him. I think that was a really solid piece. And they might be the second best team in the AL. They really might be.
I'm glad you brought up Hunter Renfroe, because I actually hated that trade. Now, Renfroe's a decent player.
Mm-hmm.
I traded Tommy Pham for him, and Tommy Pham's a better player than him, more efficient player, better fielder. Renfroe will slide in at right field, and he is a power hitter. So I don't think it's like a massive downgrade or anything.
Right.
I didn't like that trade personally. As far as their moves, I do like that they brought in Jose Martinez for basically nothing.
From nothing.
And especially he's better suited for the AL because he's more of a DH at this point than, say, a first baseman.
Mm-hmm.
The Rays are a threat, no doubt about it. The starting rotation, more so than anything. Like you mentioned, they're stacked. Pretty much all those starters, you feel comfortable trotting out there every 5th day, and they are definitely going to be a problem. And they're mostly healthy. I know Tyler Glasnow and Austin Meadows, who they got in that Pirates trade for Chris Archer,
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago, both have tested positive for COVID-19. But I think they'll be back in time for the start of the regular season. And even if not, I think they tested positive a while ago, so they're not going to miss a lot of games. But you do have a good lineup. I'm not crazy about their lineup. I think there's a little too much, strikeout, home run type guys like
I guess
Mike Zunino. But yes, the Rays are a team that is very, I know you love this word, very plucky. and they find a way to win 90 games or at least compete seemingly every year, especially the last few seasons. So they are definitely in the race right behind the Yankees.
And when I was saying you need one of two things, either those solid veteran leaders and a good pitching staff, or young legends, like I like to say. Well, the Rays are one of those, and they have the veteran guys who are able to do work. They've got that pitching staff that you need. They scare me a bit. I'm not gonna front, man. They really do scare me because even like we saw like a guy like Yandy Diaz, their third baseman. He ain't nobody special, but for a couple of month and a half there, he was one of the best hitters in baseball. 300 hitter, and really had at least one useful month, maybe 2 months where he was right and then he fell off. But guys like that, you don't expect those types of guys. But Austin Meadows, I do like the Renfroe addition. And even going out, Kevin Kiermaier is one of my favorite guys in their outfield. It's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough because aside from them, I do also like the Blue Jays. I know Bob's a little more bullish on the Blue Jays in terms of them not being quite right, but they fall into that second group where they've got a bunch of young guys, and you know how I feel about these young legends. And in baseball, young guys are getting more attention. They're getting more burn than they did in 5-10 years ago even. Like, yeah, teams will be cute with the service time and how when they bring them up and they're not going to start the season in the majors, but they'll come in like a week later or something like that because it'll give the team an extra year of arbitration or some shit. Crazy things in baseball. But that stuff aside, young players are getting the rock. Like, they're getting a lot of burn, whether it be starting pitching, or in the bullpen, like a guy who's got a live arm, but the command might be a little off, or like the stamina might not be there. So he might be a starter projected, but you put him in the pen, like shit like that. Like, the Blue Jays got those young guys. They got those young guys up and down the lineup. I love Vlad Guerrero Jr. I love Bo Bichette. I love Cavan Biggio. Lourdes Gurriel Jr.'s right. I like it. I mean, what happens when Vlad hits 12 home runs in the first month, 13 home runs in the first month, something light, and Bo hits 10 himself at shortstop, you know what I'm saying? And they're one of the highest, scoring teams in the AL. Adding Ryu from the Dodgers was huge for him. I question if he has the mettle to ball in the AL East with those lineups, but that he's going to go up against, because all the AL East teams, except for the Orioles, have solid lineups. So I question if he's really ace material, but he pitched like that for most of the year for the Dodgers, and he's got playoff experience, and he is the leader of that pitching staff. Tanner Roark, Chase Anderson, Matt Shoemaker. Ken Giles is their closer, who's been lights out in the past. So they're a team to watch, I think, in that division for sure.
I agree, and it's weird because on one hand, I definitely agree with the sentiment. In a 60-game season, you could see young players really excel and shock everyone. So I do love their lineup. That's not where I'm bullish. But to one of my points earlier about having a lot of new players or a lot of new faces, that's I see it's Blue Jays. I actually think it would have been more beneficial for them if it was a 162-game season, because they could work through those issues. Whereas in a 60-game season, where you figure, doing the math, basically each starter is probably only going to get a max of 12 starts. 60 divided by 5, you look at 12 starts max for most pitchers. So they're bringing in Ryu to head the rotation. He did, even though he struggled in the second half last year with the Dodgers, he still led the NL in ERA with like a 2.3 something ERA. But also Tanner Roark comes from the Nationals. They're expecting to be at the top of the rotation. And then Chase Anderson, who right now is on the IL. I forget what injury exactly he has. It might not even be disclosed, but he comes over from being on the Brewers in the past. They're expecting those guys to play a major role in their rotation.
They are.
Like some of the other guys, like Matt Shoemaker, who's been very up and down in his career with the Angels and the Blue Jays. So I think in a 60-game sprint, it's going to be a little difficult for these new pitchers to get acclimated with the new catchers, with a new team, and also to be pitching against great lineups in the AL East, like the Yankees, Red Sox, as well as the Rays. But then you throw in facing the NL East, where 4 of those 5 teams have really great lineups as well. So I could see their rotation struggling mightily. But again, I do love their lineup. They have plenty of sons of former major leaguers, whether it's Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio.
Boba Fett.
Yep, all great players in their own right. Going forward, I think they will be great players. And then even someone like Randall Grichuk is a professional hitter. So I think, yes, the Blue Jays could be a dangerous team, but ultimately I don't think they'll be a real threat for the playoffs just because of some of those rotation worries I have. And I don't love their bullpen either. Giles has been a good closing pass, and I think he'll do fine, but not a lot to write home about after, say, Anthony Bass. And I know they brought in a few new players in the rotation, in their bullpen, rather, as well as their rotation. So just too many new faces for me on the pitching staff.
Now, it feels kind of weird to be talking about this team, like the fourth team in the division, to talk about them this way because of the team that they are, but the Boston Red Sox. This isn't the Red Sox where it was the evil empire versus Red Sox Nation. Those days, I think, are done. Their lineup is still dangerous. Their lineup is still potentially one of the better ones in the AL. But the pitching staff is awful. I can't stand it. I hate it. I couldn't hate it anymore if I tried. And I don't hate it because it's Boston. I mean, fuck them. But I hate it because not only the name's not sexy, but I really just I don't know what they're gonna do here. I think they want to go to their pen, but what is Colin McHugh really gonna light the world on fire? Is Brandon Workman really putting in that work out there as your eighth or ninth inning guy? It's fucking gross.
Last year, but
he was fine, but pineapple stuff, hate it. You know what? I have a pineapple mascot in the corner. I'm about to bring him over here. He's got sunglasses on. When I don't like something, I might just hold him up to the camera. You know what? I'm going to do that.
All right, well, you go do that. But yes, I totally agree. I think the rotation is just abysmal. And really, to start it off with the Red Sox, before I get to that, anytime you lose, arguably I don't even think it's arguable. They lost. The Red Sox lost their two best players over the course of this offseason. They lost Mookie Betts, trading him to the Dodgers.
Yuck.
And Chris Sale is done for the year with an injury. He's going to miss the entire season. So
career threatening.
And your best pitcher. Things aren't looking up, especially when you didn't make the playoffs anyway last year. So pineapples, as Dan would say.
Right here. Pineapples. This is an awesome pineapple. But in general, pineapples to that, everything about that rotation, Chris Sale being hurt and fucking out for the year because of Tommy John. It's a goddamn shame.
And then one other player I do want to mention, Dustin Pedroia, who, to me, I really was thinking about it earlier, and I can draw parallels to a local player that retired not too long ago, and that's David Wright, a beloved player, of course, by their fan bases, but also even teams of rivals, rival teams, really. Respect the hell out of those guys. Great players for a long time, just stalwarts for their team. Play their entire careers with one team, but for multiple years, just cannot get healthy. And I just feel like we're heading down that path with Dustin Pedroia, where we might not ever see him again, or if we do, it'll be very brief, and then he'll retire. He still is on the injured list. They don't know if he's even going to be able to play this year. It doesn't hurt too much because their lineup has been fine without him. They still have a great lineup when you look at players like Andrew Benintendi. Rafael Devers had a great season last year. J.D. Martinez is still one of the best DHs in all baseball. Xander Bogaerts at shortstop. So they can still be a difficult team to play, but the pitching is just horrible. He's probably fine as the number one on the staff, but ideally you'd still rather have him in the middle of the rotation. And then, Martin Perez, who they brought over. I think he was on the Rangers last year. Matt Hall, another addition. There's too many new faces on this team and too many losses sustained, especially guys like Betts and Sale, for me to think that the Red Sox are really going to be able to compete. It does help that it's a 60-game season, but I just don't see it for the Red Sox this year.
Good. And I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, the Boston hate is real. It is really real. So
manager, let's not forget, this is one of the teams that had their own involvement with the Astros, with their own sign stealing issues, and Alex Cora being their manager, one of the masterminds of the sign stealing that went on with the champion Astros in 2017. So they have Ron Renicky, former Brewers manager, coming in. There's just too many changes for them. But one thing that's that I need to point out is they did get Alex Verdugo from the Dodgers in that trade, where they also traded David Price. Let's not forget that. They also traded another one of their best players in David Price. Now, it's not going to matter because he's going to sit out the season.
Right.
But, again, another big key to their teams of the past few years is not going to play this season, not going to be on the team.
You know, and I think we haven't really talked about the Mookie Betts trade. It was rough, I think, for them. I think they were in a tough spot knowing what the situation was with his free agency and so on and so forth. But, big contract, et cetera. But I don't know. I don't feel they got enough for a guy of that standing. And it sucks that he went to Dodgers, man. You know how nice it would be to have Mookie Betts with the Yankees, bro?
What are you talking about? You knew they weren't going to trade him to the
I
Yankees.
know, but I hate it. I hate it so much.
We traded him to a major contender, but at least it's in the NL as opposed to AL. We got to play the Dodgers. Yeah. If the Yankees have to play the Dodgers in the World Series, so be it. I'd rather play the best.
I guess. But still. Anyway, Mookie Betts, I mean, where do you think the Red Sox go from here?
Sorry, what did you say?
Where do you think the Red Sox go from here? The rotation in shambles. They lost their superstar. They're clearly not the team that they used to be. They've got great pieces, Devers, Bogarts, Benintendi, Verdugo, like you said, but something missing from there. And I think it's more than just the rotation. I think it is just that flair isn't there. Do you have any concern for this team moving forward, or do you think they'll figure it out and they'll be fine because, hey, it's Boston?
Yeah, they've gone through this before. What was it, 2000? After 2013, they dumped guys like Carl Crawford, or even before that, I think it was like 2011. They dumped a bunch of players on the Dodgers, and they got back to the World Series anyway after a few years. So I forget the exact timeline. It might have been right after their World Series in 2013, probably, but they'll be fine. I think they have enough smart people in place. Now, the big problem is that they lost their GM, who had his own issues as well. Cora's gone, but the Red Sox have shown over the past 20 years that even after their championships, they've had some bad years. 2014 was not a good year for them. 2019, not a good year for them, but they won World Series the previous year. So it'll take them a few years to get back on track, and they really do need to build up that farm system back. But basically, they wanted to avoid going way over the luxury tax. I know some Boston fans, Jared Carrabis, who's part of, I think, Barstool Sports. He's a very douchey Red Sox guy who thinks that they're going to re-sign Mookie Betts after this year. I don't see it. I still think they're going to need another year or two to really get out from under some of these big contracts they've given out. That Chris Sale contract already looks horrible that they gave him last season. But I think the Red Sox will be fine, but it's going to take a few years.
And let's move on then to what might be one of the worst teams in baseball, if not the worst, would be the Baltimore Orioles. They're not contending for anything but the top pick in the next draft. And this roster is ugly. I hate it as well. There's some couple nice pieces. Hanser Alberto at second base is a nice piece. And I think Austin Hayes will be a nice center fielder for them. And, they got some nice little prospects, I guess. But, God damn it, they suck. And their pitching staff is awful. It's just so bad. I mean, the fact that John Means or Alex Cobb might be their ace, quote unquote, it's a fucking shame. I mean, Wade LeBlanc, Asher Wojciechowski, Cole Stewart, these are horrible, just horrible names. And Chris Davis is just sitting there in the 3 spot, and it's either strikeout or strikeout for that guy at this point.
At least he finally got out of his slump last year after he went, like 0 for 50? He went like a 50 at-bats or so without getting a hit. So it's ugly. We don't have to spend too much time in the world.
Nah.
It's going to be a bad team. You mentioned a lot of the bright spots. I do like Reynaldo Nunez as a DH. He has a lot of power, so look out for him. He could be one of the better DHs. John Means had a very good rookie season last year, so hopefully if you're the Orioles, you just hope that he can continue progressing, maybe be an ace of the staff. But there's just no depth on this team. Their bullpen's horrendous. And there's just no, even in the lineup, yes, there's some nice pieces we mentioned. There's no like franchise cornerstone. They're still waiting for that guy to either develop in their farm system or for him to be drafted and, well, develop in the farm system, because they're not going to be able to make trades with what they have. They don't really have a lot of major league players on their roster. This is a bad team. I'd be shot. This is one of those teams that I give no shot, even in a 60-game season, to pull off any surprises.
I mean, the closest thing the Orioles have to a franchise cornerstone is catcher prospect Adley Rutschman. He is, I think, he would be starting out in the A level if there were, minor leagues this year. But I don't think he's going to be on the roster to start the season. Maybe he might be one of those side guys just in case injury or something like that pops up. But he's a legit top 5 prospect in all of baseball, and definitely their best prospect that they have in their program in the minor leagues. So he's as close to that as they might have, but still, it's going to be a bad year of baseball in Baltimore.
It definitely will be. So
enough of them.
Yeah, enough of them, for sure.
Yes. Let's talk about the other East, the NL. They're going to be going with the DH for the first time, as Bob mentioned. There's definitely benefits a couple of these teams. And this is another one, NL East, another one that's going to be tough. There's at least 3 teams that could legitimately be considered division contenders and playoff contenders for sure. And one of those teams is right here in New York, Bob. So it's New York Mets. I'm looking at this lineup, and I present this question to you, Bob. This Mets team is currently assembled with this lineup, fucking stacked, and this pitching staff, also stacked. One of the better ones potentially in the NL. Do you really consider them a contender, not only for the division, but maybe more in the shortened season? Or do you think the Mets are more middle of the pack with that potential? Where do you think they lean more on that scale?
I 100% consider them a contender. When I was making my predictions, it was between them, the Braves, and the Nationals.
Mm-hmm.
We'll know a little later on in this edition of our podcast or Zoom, YouTube video, what teams I wound up picking for this division as well as wild card. I do have a wild card coming out of this division as well, and I definitely think they can contend. Deep lineup, deep rotation. It all hinges on the bullpen. Really, last year, if not for how piss poor their bullpen performed, they probably do make the playoffs. They probably do fit in as a wild card last year. Now, the Braves won the division last year and pretty comfortably, but I think if the Mets didn't have so many blown saves by Edwin Diaz, they very well could have been in the playoffs. And I fully expect them to contend and be right there till the end of the season. You get Cespedes back, which is a huge boon to this team. He really was the driving force toward them winning the pennant in 2015. They re-signed him, and granted that contract hasn't worked out so far, but it's his final year. He'll be playing for his next contract, and it's absolutely perfect that they can slide him in at DH. Now, he has worked in the outfield. You may see him there every now and then, but for the most part, he's going to be sliding into DH. But he seems fully recovered from his double heel surgery, his incident with the wild boar last summer where he fractured one of his ankles. But he seems to be finally healthy. Pete Alonso, reigning Rookie of the Year, who was one of the few award predictions that I got right last year. I predicted him to win NL Rookie of the Year, and he did. Set the rookie home run record with 53 home runs. You got DeGrom off back-to-back Cy Youngs. Marcus Stroman, that's really the key to the pitching staff is how he performs. I'd say Cespedes is really the key as far as the lineup goes, since we haven't seen him in a while.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the pitching staff goes, it's Stroman, who's pretty disappointing, honestly, after coming by a trade with the Blue Jays at the trade deadline last year. But I think he also will be trying to perform his best, not only because he's a competitor and he wants to, but because he's in the final year of his deal as well. He's going to want a huge free agent contract. You just look at how much money a guy like Zach Wheeler, who the Mets lost to the Phillies, got. Stroman could surpass that in this offseason if he has a good year. It might only be 12 starts, but regardless, teams always need pitching. We know that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need starters. So he's really the key to the pitching staff for me. But overall, the biggest key is how their bullpen bounces back. And I just think they can't be any worse. I don't know if Diaz is going to be able to hold down the closing spot, but at least you would figure he'll start there anyway. And he was so good with the Mariners and it'll probably help him that there's no fans in the stands. So you won't have to have as much pressure on you. So I think the Mets 100% will be able to contend this year. It's just a matter of, can their bullpen perform? And also we got to see what kind of manager Luis Rojas is. He wasn't expected to be the manager, but with the fallout of everything that happened with the Astros cheating scandal, Carlos Beltran was relieved of his job, didn't even get to manage one day really before he was canned not long after everything broke. So I definitely think the Mets can contend, and I really love a lot of the aspects of this team.
I mean, you know how I feel about the Mets, but I asked you that question because I wanted to just make sure we were in agreement there, because I think they're a real good contender as well. And I think this is as close as the Mets have been in years. I think this is a prime opportunity for them to really show that they're ready to make a statement. The pieces are in place. And it goes beyond a guy like Cespedes coming back and seeing what he can do. Can he get 20 home runs and stay healthy for 60 games? That'd be amazing. That would definitely be a boon. They'll take that to the bank. But Pete Alonso's a goaty guy. Jeff McNeil's fucking right. Michael Conforto. I know Mets fans are like love and hate with Conforto, but when he's on, he's on. J.D. Davis is useful. Cano's nice to have there. Cespedes hopefully comes back healthy. Even Brandon Nimmo has had his moments. And it's an interesting team for sure. I want to see what the team does when it comes to adversity, because we're here in New York and the pressure's going to be on. It's going to be on early. This is one of those teams that I feel might be a slow starter. We know DeGrom will always be on, but Stroman can be spotty. Porcello, you're relying on him to be a 3-starter, 4-starter maybe. Matz has shown he has these cold streaks. If he starts cold, it's ugly. It's really threatening, but you don't want to just be stuck with DeGrom as your guy and that's it. So they're one of those teams that doesn't really fit either that young players guy. I mean, Alonso is the young guy, but and maybe McNeil, but even still, the rest of the line for the most part is pretty seasoned. Cano, Cespedes, Ramos, but they don't really fit in that. They got these young legends like the Toronto Blue Jays or anything like that. And I like the pitching staff if they're all on, but they got to be on. That's my only question about them. And the East is tough. The Braves are fucking right. The Nats are right. I mean, the Marlins are going to be butthole. That's to be expected. But even the Phillies can really do something special. Their lineup is stacked too. This is a tough division.
It really is. It's arguably the best division in baseball. I think it is. You have 4 really legitimate teams. And it doesn't help that they have to face those tough AL East teams. And they will, because of how they scheduled it. They did put 6 games between the Yankees and Mets. That will be a tough task for the Mets because, let's face it, the Yankees are one of the prohibitive favorites in all baseball to win the World Series. A couple things I do want to mention before we move on from the Mets. For one, we have to mention Noah Syndergaard, big injury, having Tommy John. I'd feel really comfortable picking them as a division winner if they had Syndergaard in that rotation.
Yeah, definitely.
Let Zach Wheeler walk, but I kind of understand, and I do like the additions of 1-year deals for guys like Porcello and Waka, who have something to prove now after having disappointing seasons last year, and in the case of Waka, some injury issues. One key factor, too, also with the bullpen is Dellin Betances, who was hurt all of last year pretty much with the Yankees, but he was also possibly going to miss the beginning of this year had it been a normal season, but he's had this extra time to get healthy. I think if he's healthy, that's a big addition. Dellin Betances was one of the most underrated, underpaid relievers in all baseball for years with the Yankees, and he's got something to prove, only on a 1-year deal. And then the last thing is the sale of the Mets, which I know a lot of Mets fans are super excited about. The Wilpons seem to finally be selling the team, And for the love of God, they just stop being shitty toward billionaire Steve Cohen? He already owns 8% of the team. You know the guy. I don't care what happened months ago and the deal fell through. If anything, you guys are bozos because that probably was the best deal you were ever going to get pre-COVID. Now you might be even taking less. So, and also they need to cut the shit and give up SNY because, oh yeah, we're going to sell the team, but we're not going to sell the rights to the network that is going to be carrying them for the next 6 or 7 years. It's like the Wilpons are just such pieces of shit that they won't sell them. And I think the J-Rod bid, the Jennifer Lopez, Alex Rodriguez bid, took a big hit. I think most Mets fans would have been fine. I even thought, all right, if not Cohen, A-Rod would be a good choice. But A-Rod made some comments recently about, oh, players should be wanting the salary cap, which is complete horseshit because of all the guys to say something like that. It should not have been A-Rod.
It should not have been.
The richest deal in history back in, what was it, 2000, 2001, 2002.
Didn't he get like $200 million deal or something like that?
$252 million deal, which was equivalent to the deal Trout got a year ago, where it's just absolutely mind-blowing and record-breaking and unbelievable for a athlete yet. And now he's saying they should have a salary cap. So that to me is like, no, he's probably going to be someone who's going to be stingy. Yeah, exactly, pineapple. So on behalf of all Mets fans, Will Pons, can you just please sell the team to Steve Cohen? He's a Mets fan. He has billions, and he really cares about the team. Just cut the shit.
Yeah, it's a dumpster fire. You got to get somebody in there who's going to care about the fucking team. This isn't Pittsburgh. This isn't, Milwaukee or some bullshit. This isn't even Miami where nobody cares about baseball down there, okay? This is fucking New York. You got a guy who's got the money to blow. Like Bob said, he's a fan. I couldn't agree with Bob anymore on this topic. Sell the fucking team. Cut the shit, Wilpons. You lost. You're fucking out. Everyone hates you. You might be if it weren't for Dolan and the Knicks, the Wilpons would probably be the most hated ownership group in fucking baseball or in sports in New York. But let's move on. There's still 3 or 4 other teams to talk about in the NL East. Now, one of them should be considered one of the favorites in the whole league to win it all. I'm talking about the Atlanta Braves. I love the Braves this year, man. Even if it was a regular season, 160 games, I would love this fucking team. The lineup is stacked. It's got young legends. It's got solid veterans. Their pitching staff is right. It also has the right combination of youth, veteran leadership, depth. The bullpen has got horses in it. They got guys, even guys like Mark Melancon, and I mean, aside from the Dodgers, I think the Braves are one of the more dangerous teams in not only the NL but all in baseball. And I think the Braves should be strongly considered widely as a top 5 team in baseball and challenging, I think, the Dodgers for supremacy. If the Dodgers were so goddamn stacked, I'd say the Braves might be my favorite in the NL. I'm riding that train. I'm on it, and they impress me. Bob knows nothing impresses me. But he knows how much I like teams that have depth. He knows I like pitching. I love starting pitching. I love that they have those options. Cole Hamels ain't what he was, but he was a great get for him. And I think he'll help settle down their rotation a bit because, dude, the 1 through 5, Soroka, Hamels, Foltynewicz, whatever, Fried, and even a guy like Sean Newcomb or Kyle Wright or Toussaint or fucking Felix Hernandez, one of those guys, they're in a great spot. And I haven't even talked about Ronald Acuna, who, if we were talking about prediction, I'd probably pick him to be the NL MVP. Either him or Ozzie Albies. The niggas are right. You guys are so fucking right.
They really are. They're loaded. Now, with Cole Hamels, the only unfortunate thing is he's going to start the season on IL, but I don't think he's going to miss too much time, hopefully for the Braves' sake. But they have a really good rotation. Mike Soroka was, I think he was the Rookie of the Year last year. If not, he was second in the voting. He was a great pitcher for them, and they have depth. And they also have continuity, which is one of the things I mentioned with the Yankees. This is a team that's doesn't have a lot of new players on the team, and they have a good manager in Brian Snitker. They had Will Smith, so he's a good addition as a back of the bullpen type pitcher, a setup man for Mark Melanson. And then Marcell Ozuna is one of the best hitters, not one of the best hitters, but he's one of the best hitters that was a free agent this offseason, and easily can, in a normal season, get 90 to 100 RBIs for a team. He's a cog in the middle of the lineup. Now, one concern for them besides Hamels is the fact that Freddie Freeman had a big scare with COVID-19. He's one of the players one of all the athletes in all of sports that got hit hardest by COVID-19. I believe his wife also has it. His aunt had it. And recently he had like 104.5 fever. He said he was praying like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go. Fortunately, he's rebounded. And after that day, his fever did lessen and his temperature lowered.
Mm-hmm.
But he was really scared. He had one of the worst experiences of anybody with COVID-19, especially for a guy who's only 30 or 31. He might not be ready for opening day, but it seems like he'll be ready not too long after that. But they can go truck on without him. Ozzie Albies led the NL in hits last year at second base for the Braves. Ronald Acuna is pretty much a star already and a budding superstar at that. He led the NL in runs as well as stolen bases. He's a do-it-all type player. Also a great fielder as well. 5-tool player. And we love to talk about 5-tool players. That's what you covet as a baseball team, and he's one of those. And they're just really deep. They have a good bench too. So just like you, I love the Braves, and with the continuity they have, I fully expect them to be a major contender, not only for the division, but also a World Series contender.
Absolutely. Now, talking about World Series contenders, I mean, you can't go too much farther than Washington to talk about contenders and champions. The Washington Nationals are another team that is stacked. And I keep saying that, but listen, if it's a fact, it's a fact. Maybe I can find a different analogy or just something, something different to say, but 1 through 9, DH or not DH, I mean, pick your flavor, man. Trey Turner, speed, stolen base guy, get on base guy, eating in the 2 spot. Castro, Juan Soto's a stud. Howie Kendrick, old but doing his thing. I love Carter Kieboom, the third baseman prospect that they're going to give the rock to pretty much. It's either him or Ruben Cabrera. Victor Robles, who last year, Bob knows I was really high on Victor Robles last year. He disappointed, but he's still young, and he's going to get the time. And then their starting pitching staff might be the best in baseball. Scherzer 1, Strasburg 2. They brought back with fat money. Corbin, left-hander, as their 3 pitcher, who on other teams might even be their best pitcher. So the 1, 2, 3, I really, beg our listeners, our watchers, to find a team that has a better rotation. There's a couple that are close, but I mean, if these guys are on and they're healthy, you'd be tough to find a 1-2 of Scherzer and Strasburg, and then Corbin on top. My God, you want to talk about horses? These boys got them, and even a guy like Joe Ross, who was a solid option for them last year. Him, Austin Voth, vying for that 5th spot. I like that. I like that a lot. I mean, I think Voth. No, yeah. Voth was the guy I was thinking of.
Well, unfortunately for them, Ross isn't going to be an option. He's opt out for COVID.
I forgot about that. Right.
They're actually one of the teams that got hardest hit by opt-outs. There haven't been many. I did mention it at the beginning of this show that there's some players that have opted out, but not a lot. I only totaled 12 overall that have opted out of this season, and the Nationals actually have 3 of them. So long-time National and first baseman Ryan Zimmerman.
Yep.
Joe Ross, we just touched on, and then catcher Wellington Castillo is also going to opt out of this season. So they have 3 of the 12 so far that have opted out. But even with that said, lineup is still super deep. You touched on that. Eric Timms was a productive player for the Brewers, mostly a home run type hitter. Not going to give you great average, but he can fit in at first base. And they have a good bench still. So even he might not be an everyday player, but he's someone that can play first base, DH. And, even when he gets subbed out, they still have very capable players. Starlin Castro used to be a Yankee last couple of years with the Marlins. Professional hitter, good option at second base. And the rotation, one of the best. It's just a matter of, are they going to suffer a World Series hangover potentially, especially with also a few guys, like we mentioned, opting out? And then at what point is Scherzer ever going to slow down? I'm not going to predict it for this year, but it's got to happen eventually. He's in his mid-30s.
Eventually.
He's been racking up tons of innings for so many years. He got rocked, actually, yesterday by the Phillies, but I'm not going to get crazy about that. It is an exhibition game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I worry about in a 60-game season for the Nationals. I think it would have been better if it was 162 because the hangover wouldn't affect them as much. They'd still maybe start off slow, but could rebound over a long season. They don't have that option this year. Last year they started 19-31. They were horrendous. If they start 19-31 this year,
one of those slow starters.
They're not making the playoffs, so they can't afford that slow start again. So that's really my only concern with them. But from a roster standpoint, they have a lot of what you need. I still don't love their bullpen. That's one thing. But they do have good pieces like Sean Doolittle and then Daniel Hudson. So I'm not too terribly concerned. They'll still certainly be a contender in the end at least.
No, absolutely, dude. And then moving on to seemingly another stacked team, the Philadelphia Phillies. Bryce Harper, Jake Realmuto, Bryce Hoskins, Didi Gregorius, John Segura. Pretty hefty lineup right there. Andrew McCutchen, Scott Kingery, who's been up and down and injured and stuff like that, but that's nice, man. And the starting pitching, Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler, who they signed in the offseason to a fat contract. Jake Arrieta's in 3 slot. Eflin and Pivetta, their current projected 4 and 5, are all right. They've had their highs, but they've had their lows, and their lows are ugly. Especially Eflin. Eflin had a stretch where he was actually one of the better pitchers for like a month, and then it fell off like Owen Hart. But with a guy like Nola's a guaranteed stud. Definitely an ace. Zach Wheeler, they're hoping steps it up a notch because I don't think he was worth that contract that they gave him this offseason. And I think the Mets actually dodged the bullet on that front, I think. He's a good player, solid for sure, but 5 years, $118 million is a bit rich for my blood. I don't know. I'm just not a fan. So that remains to be seen if he can elevate his game to that contract and show that he's a legitimate number 2 starter. But they could be a dangerous squad. They're one of those veteran-laden squads that have some solid starting pitching options that I was talking about before. They're one of those teams. And I'm not going to project them to really make that type of noise. But dude, if Bryce Harper catches fire, the sky's the limit. A guy like Hoskins, he can rake, bro. Realmuto, I love Realmuto. I've had him on my fantasy team the last couple of years, which I did check, by the way, and I did win last year. Bob finished in second. He won the year before that. I just want to throw that out there for factual purposes. But anyway, fantasy baseball aside, championships aside, Realmuto, I'm a big fan of Realmuto, and he's a solid 300 hitter, one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. I'm a fan, but as we said before, we keep saying it's going to be tough. Both East are tough, and I think the Phillies are good, but these other teams are better. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It happens. Just sucks that they're all in the same division.
Definitely. It sucks for these teams to have such tough divisions when other ones, especially say like the AL Central.
Central's just trash.
But the Phillies, again, is similar to a lot of these other teams in the division, just a loaded lineup, so many great professional hitters. I think adding Didi Gregorius is going to help a lot. Add another lefty in that lineup. And there's a lot of good veteran pieces in there. Andrew McCutchen, Jay Bruce, I don't think they're washed up. They're still guys who aren't going to hit for the averages they used to, but still capable of hitting plenty of home runs, getting clutch hits. I just really question their rotation because, yes, Nola's legit, but similar to you, I think Wheeler got a little bit overpaid. It is the going rate for starters, but he's proven, if you look at his statistics, to be pretty much just an average pitcher over the course of his career so far, all with the Mets. But I also don't love their bullpen. They had to bring in a lot of new pieces because their bullpen is not that good. Hector Neris is battling COVID right now. Hopefully, he won't be out too long. Their closer. He had a pretty solid year last year. One big addition, though, that isn't even on the playing roster is Joe Girardi. I think that
Yes.
Mets really should have hired. I know Mets fans really wanted him to be the manager. So that could help them win a couple more games because he knows how to handle a bullpen. And he's just, to me, one of the best managers in the game today. So that'll definitely help them. But it will remain to be seen whether I pick them for a playoff spot or not.
And then with that in mind, going to a team that I'm pretty sure won't be contending for anything either, similar to the Baltimore Orioles. That, of course, is the Miami Marlins. Now, this is one of the more, how should I put this, disappointing rosters in the league. It's not as bad as Baltimore's. I mean, I do like some of the pieces that Miami has. Jonathan Villar is a legitimate major leaguer, a threat to hit 15, 20 home runs this season and steal 20 bases. Brian Anderson's legit at third base. I like Isan Diaz at second base. I think he's a sleeper candidate, young, live bat. And then their pitching staff doesn't really have anything special, but they've got some okay pieces, I guess. We'll see. It's threatening that they have Sandy Alcantara as their number one starting pitcher, and I kind of hate that, but it is what it is. I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is going to be one of the worst teams in baseball. I don't think they will be a surprise candidate. They don't really have, I mean, they have a solid minor league system, farm system they can draw from. But aside from Sixto Sanchez, a pitcher, and JJ Blide, who plays outfield and first base, those guys don't really light the world on fire. They're both top 30 prospects according to MLB.com, but I don't think those are the kind of guys that are really threats to do something special out of left field. Whereas like Tampa Bay has like a guy like Wander Franco, for example, or Brendan McKay, the left-handed pitcher, who could also hit at times if they need him to. Like those kinds of prospects are guys that you expect to potentially step up and really take the league by storm early on. That's the kind of level that you're looking for. But I don't think Miami has that. I think they're building for the future. Jeter and that group down there have a plan, but this year, it ain't it.
Yeah, I tend to agree. More so from the division standpoint because of how strong it is.
No,
I do like the additions of some really professional hitters that they really lacked last year.
they
Um,
did.
I do like the additions of Jesus Aguilar from the Brewers, and VR had a very good season for the Orioles as well. So there's some pieces within their lineup that can cause problems for teams. Even their rotation, yes, I agree, it's generally ugly, especially when you compare it to some of the top aces that are within this division. But
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Smith, especially, is someone that had shown flashes last year of being a guy who could be a top of the rotation pitcher
Mm-hmm.
going forward. But again, they just have too many holes on the roster. No talent that really stands out as this is going to be a cornerstone for the franchise. And they also had to bring in a bunch of new relievers, whether it's Steven
I was
Tarver,
just gonna say, yep.
Yankees, Brad Boxberger, Brandon Kinster, who actually is a good player. I think with the Twins, he did pretty well. I could be wrong on the team, but
Kinsler, Chicago Cubs.
Chicago, okay, Cubs, sorry. But basically, yeah, they had to bring in a lot of new pieces in their bullpen, and yeah, they brought in about 10 new players that are probably going to be on the opening day roster. So back to what I was talking about before, I think that's going to hurt any team when you have so many new faces, and especially when you're a bad roster to begin with. I think it's just a recipe that does not help you at all. Fortunately, it's 60 games, so I think they're going to win some games that people wouldn't expect. I don't think they're going to be completely asshole, basically. I don't think they're going to be an Orioles level team or
Maybe not that bad, but they're definitely going to be one of the bottom feeders.
right. No, and you said you don't think they're as bad as the Orioles. I just feel like I wouldn't be shocked if they pulled off some surprises and weren't even like one of the worst three teams. But I'm not going out on a limb. I still think they're going to be toward the bottom of baseball in general.
Well, I mean, they do have a top 10 farm system, but this ain't the year for those sorts of shenanigans. Now, with all that in mind, Bob, we've said a lot. Now it's time for prediction time.
Yes.
Who's winning the AL East?
New York Yankees.
Okay. I'm going to also say the Yankees. Who's winning the NL East?
This is the one that was probably the hardest for me. I was really tempted between the Nationals and Mets to pull off the surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Braves won it last year, but at the end of the day, I just didn't have the sand to do it. I'm going to go with the Braves to win the NL East.
I'm also going to go with the Braves. I mean, I was jerking them off before and calling them the top 5 team.
It's so
So,
funny if you didn't pick them after you were really. I mean, we're both high on them, but you were really drinking the Kool-Aid.
yeah, right. I was slurping. I mean, you know what? They're not going to win the division. They're not even going to make the playoffs. So, yeah, no. I'll go with the Braves. Now, here's the question. Do you have a wild card team coming from either of these divisions?
I do. And it isn't actually from the AL East. I actually don't love the Rays enough.
Interesting.
As good as they were last year, I still just something. It's probably unfair because they still, regardless of how we feel, they still seemingly are always in the mix. But I'm going to say they won't. I don't want to go too chalky. As is, looking at my predictions, I have a lot of teams that made it last year, but I wanted to pick the Mets, and I'm sorry, Mets fans. I just couldn't pick them over the Nationals because they have a different wild card from a different NL division. So I have the Mets super close, but I'm gonna have to go with the Nationals as a wild card. And one other thing I forgot to mention a little earlier that I do want to mention with the Braves is one other key factor. There are two things I want to mention. One is that they were going to sign Yasiel Puig, and that would be really to take the place of Nick Markakis, who is one of those players opting out because of COVID. Felix Hernandez, who they brought in from the Mariners, also is opting out. But basically, Puig tested positive for COVID, which nullified his deal. However, I still think that they'll probably wind up signing him anyway after a couple weeks. So I think that's another thing that will make the Braves even stronger. But ultimately, I have the Braves winning the division and the Nationals just barely beating out the Mets. But it would not shock me at all if the Mets were to make the playoffs as a wild card.
Okay. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on both of those fronts. I think the American League East will have 2 playoff teams. And I think that other playoff team is going to be the Rays. Unless something random happens and this team just shits the bed, the talent is too overwhelming. They have one of the teams with almost a perfect combination of veteran leadership that's been successful in this on the team last year. The pitching, which if they're all healthy, I mean, Tampa Bay might have one of the best pitching staffs in the American League for sure. And they've got those young pieces that they can plug in, like I said earlier. So I don't know how you don't put them in the top. I was there last year, and I was talking hella shit about the Rays last year. And I was disrespecting them and what they did the year before, and I was shitting on them. And I'm not going to make that mistake again. And if I'm wrong, cool, I'm wrong. That'll happen in this business. But looking at the roster, just looking at the raw data and the information, I think they're one of the better teams in the American League. If they don't make the playoffs, it'll be injuries or something stupid like that. So I'm going to go with the Rays. And I'm probably going to feel stupid about this, but I'm actually going to go with the Mets as one of my wild cards in the National League. I think the Nationals are fucking right. I think they're right there. I love the horses that they have 1, 2, 3. But this is New York, so I'm going to give a little extra love to the Mets for that reason. Pete Alonso's a beast. Even if Cespedes doesn't do jack shit, they still have options in J.D. Davis or Dominic Smith. They can't be any worse on defense than they were last year. So, there's only one way to go from here, at least for those two guys, if Cespedes is completely fucking useless. And it sucks that they don't have Syndergaard, but let's go New York. Let's fucking do it.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be shocked. And on one hand, I'm mad that I didn't pick them because you picked them, and now if they make it, you're gonna look good. But at the same time, I don't want to have the same predictions. So ultimately, that's like I said before, that was the hardest one for me, was deciding who wins the division and which one winds up as the wild card. And again, I wouldn't be shocked if the Nationals have a World Series hangover and don't even make it at all.
That's part of it, yeah.
At the end of the day, I just had to go with the Nationals, the reigning champs, and I also didn't. I thought about just changing it, and that would have been fine. But a couple of weeks ago, when we did that other podcast with Greg, I had the Nationals as one of the top 5 contenders, and I still see no reason really to go against that. They have those top of the rotation guys, and even though I'm not picking them for the division, it's a whole new ballgame once you get to the postseason. Postseason's remaining the same this year. It's going to be, a 5-game series in the ALDS, and then the championship series and the World Series are going to be 7-game series. So even though we might see a team come out of nowhere in a 60-game season and make it to the playoff, I still think we'll see the cream rise to the top in the playoffs because it's the same format.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so we differ on our wild cards, but we're gonna take a little break for this for the moment. We're gonna break this up into 3 different videos. So this one was the East, next one's gonna be the Central, and finally the West. I'm Dan Kornhauser.
I'm Bobby Hunt.
Thank you guys for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you in the next video. Catch you guys later.